2 days ago, they could have just had several of their buddies blown up. There was a couple of guys that had survived a few attacks. And I just remember this white flash going off. Once we loaded up and kind of geared up to go, we got over in country and, man, things were just different this go around. I mean, this was back when Fallujah was real big on the news, and the whole guerrilla warfare IED part of the game was new. That was not what was experienced on the invasion at all. And I remember getting to a particular area that we did quite a bit of work in near the Syrian border. It was over in Husayba. Man, it was just an outlawed town. I mean, it was literally like the border checkpoint. Like if you was going from California into Mexico and all the cars drive through. I mean, this was like right there. Wow. So it was like a stronghold for, all these guys bringing all these rockets and IEDs and everything coming in. And so we was out there doing quite a bit of work. And, man, I just remember when we got to the area to settle in, I mean, all the CAT teams, which I used to be a part of prior to going into recon, were just destroyed. I mean, these infantry units were just hammered with IEDs. This is not something that we was used to. This was a new phase of the war. And, it was just, I remember getting there and one of the CAT teams was just completely dismembered. There was a couple of guys that had survived a few attacks from that entire CAT team, and the guy was being sent back to the States because the entire team had been destroyed with just a couple of weeks of being in country. And our job specifically, what we was doing was to do like counter IED placement. We did a lot of ambush patrols to try to deter and stop the IED placement from the insurgents that had come into the city.
The cash people putting them in.
Yep, okay. Yep. And we did a lot of surveillance to try to find, where these caches were and stuff. Just try to find where the cells were at inside the city.
Did y'all raid them once you found out?
Yes, yeah, we did. And some were smaller raids, some of them were huge. But we did a lot of raids. We did a lot of counter IED, ambush patrols. But no matter what you did, these guys just they always found the way to get it done, and these infantry guys that we were there to support were just, man, they were just being blown up left and right. I mean, and there was a fob inside the city that we worked out of, and a fob is a forward operating base, and it's basically, it's like a little sandcastle is all it is. It's not very big at all. It's constantly getting hammered by rockets and mortars and things like that. You'll be in there, and if it's, if you're not on an op, or like for the infantry guys we was supporting at the time, if they weren't on a rotation out doing patrols or something through the streets, they had some computers. They had an area where you could go send emails back home and stuff. I mean, you just be in there sending an email back home, and a mortar would just land inside the fob. Then everybody get quiet for a second and listen, and then you start hearing guys outside laughing, and that's how you knew everybody was okay. I mean, you start finding a dark sense of humor in these areas where it's like rockets would come in and hit. As long as everybody was okay, we just start laughing it off. Like, you just got used to it.
Yeah, survived another one.
Yeah. And but yeah, that was kind of a new phase of the war that we wasn't used to. And it was a pretty violent exposure. When I was over there, there was no upgraded armor on any of the vehicles. Again, because we didn't know it was needed. All the Humvees rolling around had no extra plating on them. And we rolled around we had Humvees that were more like a truck. They had a truck bed on them and had benches because we did a lot of raids and stuff. Had a gun mount in the back, but you just were like sitting in the back of a truck on a bench. And I remember when they sent, after a couple months of being over there, we got these plates sent on the side of them to try to help with this stuff. But yeah, the vehicles had no up armor on them at all when I was over there. And but as they started shipping that stuff over to us and the vehicles started getting upgraded, you know, it stopped. It helped, but it did not stop. They just beefed up what they was blowing everything up with. You know, and I remember being over there, you know, after just a few weeks of being in the area of operation we was working in, the infantry guys were kind of patrolling around one evening, and we sent a couple of our teams out to kind of walk with them and just kind of get the lay of the land, because these guys had been there for a little bit, and they were kind of like, hey, you know, we're kind of keep an eye on this and these guys over here kind of thing. And there's a cemetery in the middle of the city, and their cemeteries over there have stone walls built around them. You know, it's not like here where you can drive down and you can look over in a cemetery and they keep it well groomed. Over there, they don't do that. Like, you can't see inside of it.
It's real tall.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the tactics that they would use is they would plant IEDs on the inside of those cemetery walls. And so as you're walking by it, they would detonate them where you couldn't see them laying there. But they'd be up on top of a rooftop somewhere, or in a two-story building where they could see over there, and when it would line up with you, that's when they would blow it.
Command detonate them.
Yeah, and one of the guys in our team had got hit just a few weeks in, and I mean, it just shredded the guy. He did survive, but had to get an immediate medevac out of there. And yeah, so I mean, it was just, again, this was just all new. This was a new type of war we was fighting at the time. And there was a lot of firefights that did take place, but not as much as trying to do the counter IED stuff and surveillance to try to stop some of that. Even outside the city, trying to find where it was coming in from outside the city, we did a lot of stuff to that nature when I was over in Iraq. But yeah, that's kind of the overview of my deployment over there and what we did.
Hey, Nick, you told an interesting story last time. You had talked about how one of your teammates had taken some breacher blankets,
yeah,
and put them on the bottom of your Humvee, and how that kind of saved you, and you were very thankful for him and that he did that. Do you mind sharing that with us again?
Yeah, absolutely. I
love this story.
In our unit, you know, again, like, you know, when you're in a special team, a lot of the gear and things we do are a little different. So some of the trucks we roll around in will look a little different than a standard infantry's trucks do, because our mission's a little different. And I would use the word, I don't personally always feel it's more special in my heart because of what I see the infantry guys go through, and that's where I came from. It may be a little more surgical, but you know, to me, the infantry guys, man, they are the gangbangers of the group, dude.
We used to say they're harder than we are.
Oh yeah,
because they're like, man, you know, when you get in special forces, especially as a SEAL, you're kind of treated like a rock star.
Yeah.
You know, and then you see the infantry guys and just how they're sucking it up, and you're like, oh man,
yeah,
like these guys, they're tougher than us.
Oh yeah, I
You
totally.
know, we may have gone through tougher training.
Yeah.
But what they're doing out here, the way they're sucking this stuff up, like, you know, like, oh man. So I always respected the snot out of them.
I agree, totally. And, you know, we live in a day and age right now where, you know, the special units get a lot of attention. Everybody wants to hear the stories of that stuff. And I think that's great. But something that doesn't get a lot of light shed on it, and it should, was the infantry units of the Army and the Marine Corps. I mean, like I said, I always use the term, I'm like, dude, those are the
going out doing those presence patrols, and like you said, just eating it.
Just the mind and the grit, the heart. I mean, they are the gangbangers of the whole story. And they would just, I mean, they would literally come off of a patrol knowing that I'm just going to be walking around hoping somebody starts shooting at me today, trying to draw out fire.
That's what those presence patrols are. Like, hey, we're present.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Yes,
know?
It's like them walking out at high noon saying, "Here we
Yeah.
are. If anybody
Yeah.
wants some." But again, this was a new phase of the war where, the way these insurgents were fighting, most of them was they do these hard hits on them by trying to blow them up, and then hit them with rockets, and then maybe the gunfire would come out after that, and whatever was left is what would re-engage with gunfire. And these guys would, every day this was their life. They get up and they patrol. If you're in a squad, you're on rotation, and that's all they do is just walk around the city hoping somebody wants to start something with them. And if in their 4 or 5 or 6 hour patrol that they do, they come back in and they're on what's called react. Well, what that means is they're not out walking around. There's more squads out there taking their place. They're there in case something does pop off. Then they load up and head out to engage and
QRF.
support. Yeah, QR,
So they're
quick react
constantly-
force. And then they get a portion of time when they get to lay down and rest, and they're not on react. But when they wake up, man, this is their life. And 2 days ago they could have just had several of their buddies blown up, and it's like, well, but you're back on now. I mean, you're back out walking the same streets you just blew up 2 days before. And so these guys, our job was really, it was to support them. And you think being in a special unit, you're the guy you're the team that's there to save the day, and it's like, man, really, we're there to support the cause of these guys. And so, but we was assigned to do a presence patrol op on the outer part of the city, and we was kind of in between ops. I don't know what the particular reason for this was, but we was tasked with getting outside the city, and there was a ridge line along the city that they wanted us to go out and do a recon on, and it was more of a presence op just to show that we was doing something on the outside of the city. And I remember having this young guy that was attached to our unit. He was part of our comm shop, one of the guys that worked on our radios and stuff. And he was not an operator, but he was attached to our unit. He got deployed with us. And man, this young man just wanted to go on something with us. He wanted to go out with the team. And I remember he just kept being told, no, you can't, you're not trained, you can't go on this. And this particular op was one that they felt he could go on, and I remember he got assigned to be in my truck. And I remember as we was kind of going over the brief and going over what the op was going to be, and he got in my truck, and I remember this guy just asking me, he's like, hey man, he's like what are we going to do? And I'm like, hey, you're not going to do anything. You're going to do exactly what you're told to do when you're told to do it. This kind of thing. You just need to calm down. Is what you need to do first off. And but leading up to this story, a couple days prior to that, my teammate, I was in 5th Platoon, Team 3. One of the guys on my team, Patriot, when you're in vehicles, all of us have, spots. Like I was a machine gunner in the infantry, so I stood in the back of the truck on the gun mount. It just made sense. My ATL was the one that rode in the passenger seat of our Humvee, and then Patriot was our driver when we was doing vehicle operations. And man, one day we had an op that had got canceled. They'd called it off. I can't remember what the reason was. And we had a quad con sent over there, and that's basically just a big metal supply box. We had all these additional blast blankets that we used when we did raids and stuff. You were breaching a door, and the team stays fairly close to that door. You could throw that blanket over the first couple of guys, and it would protect them from the blowback, some of the shrapnel when you do the breach. That way you could be really close to the door and go in once you blew that door, the breach. So at any rate, we had several of these blast blankets that we wasn't using. We had an overabundance of them. And he went down where our motor pool was, where we kept all the Humvees at, and he spent an entire day down there dragging some of those extra blast blankets out and screwing them and mounting them into the bed of this truck that we had.
What's the texture of them? Are they soft, or what type of blankets are you? Said they throw them over?
Yeah, it's like a Kevlar blanket.
Yeah, it's a very, very heavy blanket.
Yeah.
Right.
Copy.
And it's he took all these and mounted them inside of the bed of that truck. And man, he did that just for me. I mean, it was all just in the bed of the truck where I was at. And he's like, I remember him coming back. I was like, hey, where's Patriot at? It's like, well, he must be in email. He might be using a sat phone calling home. Or, but I remember later that afternoon, he'd come in. It was a pretty windy day. He was all dirty, hot, sweaty. Just looked like he'd been rolling around in the dirt. And he said, hey, Nick, you're going to like what I did in the back of the truck, man. I took all these blast blankets. We had those extra ones, and I put them in the bed for you. You know, in case we run over something, maybe it'll
Help out a little bit.
Yeah, help a little bit.
Dampen some of the blast.
Yeah. And I just remember kind of being frustrated at him, like, man, why didn't you say something? Maybe I would have come and helped. Like, you're just out there working, and everybody's in here just kind of doing their thing. And
Made you feel like a turd?
yeah. And, I remember being kind of bitter at him about it, and not as grateful as I am today. And man, it was a couple days later we was doing this op I was just telling you guys about, and we had just rolled outside of the city, and we got up on this ridge line, and and you don't ever just let your guard down, but you get in certain areas where you can kind of gear down a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you're in the city, I mean, you're on alert at all times. And we got up on this ridge line, and I remember all the trucks are just kind of moving in a formation. We're going down this road. And I remember just kind of looking out to the side and kind of let my mind wander just a little bit about things going on back at home. Me and my wife were separated at the time. And I remember looking at that young man that was riding in the back of our truck. I mean, man, he's on the tailgate. I mean, he's at the ready. He's just looking around, excited to be there. And I just remember this white flash going off. I mean, it was like, man, if you've ever just been punched square in your nose, I mean, it was just like white went off. And I remember coming to, and when I came to, if you've ever been knocked out before, it's like you're waking up out of a dream. Like, I know something just happened. I don't recall what I was just doing before this. And as I opened up my eyes, I remember seeing the tail end of the truck, but I remember seeing the ground and the sky and everything was just not in its normal location. And it had just kind of started coming to me like, oh my gosh, we'd just been hit. Like, we got hit with something. And I remember as I was sitting up to look down, I thought like I was going to see like my lower half gone. And as I started looking down, I remember seeing my toes and my weapon, my M4 was laid over here on the side. And I remember grabbing it, and I grabbed it, so I knew I still had my arms. And I remember just kind of feeling along my sides, because our bullet bouncers at the time, they're open on the sides. You're protected in the front, which is why they teach you to shoot squared up, not from the
Stack
side.
blades, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I remember just kind of doing a quick feel as I was coming to, because I started reacting like something just went on. And I remember looking over there and seeing that young man just flopping around in the bed of this truck. I mean, just screaming. And I remember reaching over and trying to grab him and hold him down, because I thought for sure he had got hit with something the way he was rolling around. And I remember doing a quick check on him and feeling in his chest plates and stuff, and he wasn't bleeding. He had all of his limbs, so I thought, okay, he's okay for now. And I remember turning and looking up toward the driver's seat and the passenger seat, where the driver and my ATL was, and my ATL had reached over there and started grabbing me to pull me down. He had just come out of being knocked out as well, and he was like, get down, we just got hit. He had thought we got hit with a rocket. And Pritchard was in the driver's seat, and he had just come out of it too, but he was kind of like trying to move, those are automatic consoles on those Humvees, and he was like trying to move it like he was driving a stick shift. Like it had kind of knocked him out of it as well. And what had happened was we had run over an AP mine, an anti-personnel mine. And when we actually ran over it and detonated it, and it just blew the whole back half of the truck out. And, by this time, our other trucks had stopped. The dust had settled. They had started making their way back to our truck. And I remember sitting there and seeing a couple of the guys run around the back of the truck, and they saw me sitting there. They looked at me, saw everybody was okay, and they were like, "You're alive!" And I was like, "Yeah." And I remember everybody just started jumping up and down and hooping and hollering, and I mean laughing. Like I said, you start finding a dark sense of humor over there. What you find funny is just what keeps you sane. And I remember everybody turning toward the city and screaming "F you," and they're flipping the city off like, "Oh, you missed
Not
us,"
today.
kind of thing. Yeah, not today. I
Survive,
mean,
yeah.
everybody's like grabbing herself and stuff and dancing around. And about this time, everybody's cameras are coming out. They're taking pictures. Everybody's posing with a blowed up truck and stuff. And our headquarters truck that was with us had tried to get a hold of an engineer unit to come drag this busted Humvee out of the middle of nowhere. And they're like, "Well, hey, we're going to head back down to the fob and see if we can't get somebody up here to help get this truck out." And as they were driving off over the hill, I remember looking back toward them and watching them drive away. And just as I laid eyes on that truck, it probably got, 300 meters out there or so, I watched them hit one. I mean, I was looking at the truck when it hit it. And I mean, just explosion. I mean, this truck just looked like it got disintegrated. I mean, tires, parts, metal, stuff just went flying everywhere. And when everybody stopped and turned to look at the truck, and that was the only truck we had in that movement that looked like one of the regular hatchback Humvee trucks that had a turret on it and everything. And man, that truck was laid over on its side whenever the dust settled. And as the dust had cleared, I remember looking at that truck. It was kind of laying on its side, and out of that turret, I saw this guy's head poke out. He turned and looked back toward us, and he started doing his hands like this, and everybody was like, "Yeah!" They're all jumping and celebrating again, and flipping the city off, and "F you," just.
The joy of still being alive. After
Oh
something
yeah,
like that
yeah,
is
absolutely, man. And
overwhelming.
but it was an interesting time. But I remember my platoon sergeant was like, "Hey, everybody, stop hopping around."
Yeah.
He's like, "We're in a minefield right now." He's like, "Just stop moving." And then everybody got real serious and just everybody crawled onto the nearest truck to him and was just sitting there. And man, we were just sitting ducks for several hours.
Wow.
They ended up having to send some engineers out there, the old minesweepers, man. And I mean, just
They found
like
a lot?
You guys
yeah,
didn't
like
have any EOD units out there to help?
yeah, that's what they sent
Yeah.
out there, man. And I remember those guys coming over the hill with a couple 5-ton trucks behind them, dude. And I mean, it was just like in the old Vietnam movies where those guys are sweeping the ground, man, and they made their way all the way to us. Wow. And, and I can't remember if they had marked some other stuff that they had found or if the particular path they had taken to get to us was clear. But it was like, man, we had definitely entered something that had been a minefield. And, just to show, we had a big saying in the fob that said complacency kills. And as I use that story, I'm just like, man, it's just everywhere over there was just bad news. I mean, again, the war had changed. The war wasn't over. And
Did you guys start using sandbags, in the front?
Yeah, there was stuff that had started being done
Like,
after
all right, we need a
that.
sandbag back here. We need to sandbag the front, where everybody's feet are.
Yeah, oh yeah. And but going back to what you was mentioning about the story was my buddy that had put all those blast blankets in the bed for me. Like, had he not done that, I probably wouldn't be here talking right now. And it's, there's several other stories. You could go on all day long like that, with stuff. But yeah, that was Pritchard, and he just kind of showed back up on social media after all these years, so he'll appreciate that story. He's the kind of guy that laughs every time you bring stuff like that up. Pritchard was a good guy. He was a guy that
Thank God he did that, huh?
Oh yeah, and Pritchard was the guy. He was the kind of guy that when we got back from deployment, we wasn't back 3 or 4 days, and they said they needed another operator to fill a spot. He wasn't back here 3 or 4 days, and he volunteered, and he went right back over. By the time we come off of our little small leave from coming back, he was already gone again. But, we'd be on an OP somewhere doing a surveillance in the city, and he's the kind of guy when we get settled in, he'd come over and say, "Hey, just so you know, man, I got like 6 extra grenades in my butt pouch. Something goes on.
Just in case you need some.
Yeah, he was just that guy, dude. He always had extra stuff on him.